I want to welcome Nadine Vogel from Springboard Consulting to the stage. Thanks.
Thank you. Don't clap too much. It puts too much pressure on me to say something smart and good. So the topic for the next 10 minutes is disability, people with disabilities being the largest minority in the world. In the US, this segment has surpassed the Hispanic population by 5%. 11% of our college freshmen year over year for the last 8 years have been students with disabilities. I have 2 children with disabilities. They're 26 and 18. Yes, I had them when I was 2. And they've been to college and they've been to university. But you know what? The problem is when they go for employment. When they go for employment, they're having trouble getting jobs. And specifically in industries like technology, where technology is supposed to be the great equalizer, especially for people with disabilities. Whether we're talking about them as employees or we're talking about them as customers. So, by show of hands, how many people are working from a global perspective? Okay, almost everyone in the room. So globally, we have quotas for hiring people with disabilities. They range from 2% to 8%. In the US, if you are a federal contractor, 7% of your employees now are supposed to be people with disabilities. What are we doing around that? That doesn't mean that we should do this from the standpoint of compliance for compliance sake only and check a box. We should do this because these employees have better than average attendance rates, are more innovative than most other employees. Why the innovation? If you have ever watched, especially my older daughter who has significant disabilities, if you've ever watched her get up in the morning and see what she does just to get through the day, you would think, well, that's pretty damn innovative. And then what you realize is, you know what, it actually is pretty easy too. And it makes your job simpler. So when we bring people in as employees with disabilities, we find that others emulate what they're doing. And you become more productive. You become more innovative. The challenge is often, well, how do I find these individuals? So, remember I said about the college rate, 11% of our students. If you are recruiting and you are recruiting on college campuses, more than likely you're going to career services. Guess what, guys? Career services, you're not going to find students with disabilities. There is something called a DSO, a Disability Student Service Organization. Every college and university in the country and most other countries have one. They go by slightly different names. But this is where you need to go to identify those students. Unfortunately, less than 5 universities in the United States have a liaison half-time to really work between career services and the DSO, which is a challenge. So you think you're telling them, I want people with disabilities included, you're not getting them. I'll share a personal story. When my older daughter was about to graduate, she had 1 year left at Fairleigh Dickinson in New Jersey. Friends of hers were going for internships. She wasn't getting anything. Now, she has visible disabilities, facial deformities, things that make people make assumptions about her ability. The director of the career services program told my daughter that he was working on it. He was working on it. In the meantime, she wasn't getting anything. So I took my Springboard hat off and I put my mom hat on. And I went to go meet with the director of career services. You know what he said to me? He said, Mrs. Vogel, you have to understand, we have to get our regular students jobs first. I did not pay an irregular tuition. Think about it, right? But if that is what they're thinking, then that's what's happening. So we have to be able to work through the DSOs. Now, if you're going to work through a DSO, that's fine. But you need to be damn good at convincing them that you're not doing this to check a box. You're not doing this because of the latest regs from EEOC or the OFCCP. You have to show what you're doing relative to accommodation processes, relative to having your websites accessible, relative to all the pieces of what we call organizational readiness. Because let's say, and I will just tell you, Springboard works with companies in about 35 countries around the world. And this is what we do. We work with them around disability. So we were at a very large global technology company, and we were doing an assessment. And one of the things they said was, on our campus, it's a really large campus. I don't think I can think of anyone who is either blind or has certain disability types. And I said, well, why do you think that is? And no one knew. Everyone shook their heads. About 2 hours into the conversation, what we figured out was no one ever checked if their careers portal was WCAG accessible to someone who is blind, has a visual impairment, can't use a mouse, can't use a keyboard, have navigational issues. This is a large global tech company. Uh-oh. right? So if you have jobs on your careers portal and you don't have it accessible, it's like putting a sign out on the 405 saying, do not apply if you have a disability. Think about it. By the way, it's no different if we're talking to people with disabilities as customers. Because if they can't access your site, they're not purchasing your products and services. We have to make sure that we're doing this. It comes down to organizational readiness, right? What are you doing? Don't just talk the talk. You need to walk the talk. And the ways in which to do this. So we'll start from a technology perspective. I've spoken to many folks here, and they say, oh, well, we've done these assessments on our website, what I call the plumbing. We've checked to look at the programming behind the scenes. What have you done from a practical standpoint? Number one best practice from a practical standpoint is to do a usability study, where you have 10 people, all different disability types. Let's have them go on your careers portal, apply for a job, try to submit their resume. When we do this, we video stream live and record it, and we ask them to talk out loud about what they're experiencing. Why? Because when this report comes back to you, if you are tech and you get it, great. If you're in diversity, you're in HR, you're some other part of the organization, you get a tech report, it doesn't mean a whole lot. It has a lot of meaning, however, when you see on this screen someone in tears because they've been at this for an hour and they're still not sure if their resume went through. Now that has meaning, right? When we're talking about colleagues, employees, customers, number one best practice globally, disability etiquette and awareness training. Why? We can have all these other things in place. If I don't know that if I go to shake your hand and you have a prosthetic device, what to shake, what am I going to do? I'm probably going to sit there and look like a fool. We asked managers in a study, we said, what would you do in that situation? Number one answer we got, you won't even believe it, but I'd stand with my hands by my side and smile for fear that I'm going to do something wrong. Really? Sit, stand, or kneel during a conversation with someone in a wheelchair. Number one answer we get from middle managers is that they would kneel. Why would they kneel? They say because they could be at eye level with the individual. Well, okay, that would be a good reason. However, we typically kneel down to children. And if you're kneeling and you have bad knees and you start to wobble, what are you going to grab onto? The wheelchair. Are you supposed to touch the wheelchair? Hell no. Right? These are some basic things that we need to get our arms around. And you know, the technology industry is supposed to be the number one industry for embracing people with disabilities because so many people with disabilities use technology. That's what helps them throughout their day, whether personally or professionally. So my question to you is, what percentage of your population, employee and or customer, do you believe are people with disabilities? And if you think it's less than what it should be, one, you have absolutely no idea. Two, or you're praying for it to just someone will figure it out, you're having some issues, okay? This is, you know, if you think about this silver tsunami of people aging out of the workplace, you are going to need to rely on people with disabilities. Remember what I said at the beginning, the largest and fastest growing minority in the world. So you have to accommodate. Now, we tend to think accommodations, very expensive. Average cost of an accommodation, especially in the tech industry, less than $350. That's easy. That's easy. But the challenge is, if someone comes in and they say, you know, I hurt my wrist, I don't know if it's carpal tunnel, what's going on, you have no problem providing them a special mouse. Someone else comes in and says, you know, I just found out I'm losing my eyesight, I'm going to need these really big screens. Oh my God, it's a disability we have to accommodate. Right? What we have to think is, get out of the term accommodations. Think success strategies. Think practical applications. Think about getting the job done. This is not about someone doing less of a job. People need to do what they need to do for the job. You are all for-profit companies. This is not about charity. This is about being productive, being innovative. And you know what? For someone with a disability, we tend to refer to it as a social right. We want to help people with disabilities gain employment. We want to help them do these things. You know what, guys? They don't need your help. What they need is the same economic right to be a customer, spend money with your company, and earn a living from your company. That's all there is to it. It's very simple. It shouldn't matter if they have green eyes, blue eyes, they're 10 feet, they're 2 feet. It is what it is. The issue is that this is, you know, somebody said to me this morning, they said, oh, well, this must be the next wave. If you think it's the next wave, you are seriously behind, okay? It has been the wave. It's there already. People with disabilities come in all sizes, shapes, colors, everything else. But I got to tell you, from a global perspective, you have to look at this and understand. We tend to think in the US we're ahead of all these other countries. I just spent 2 weeks in Italy with companies all across the country. And you know what? In many cases, they're ahead of us. In many cases, we have our own companies that are in other countries doing a heck of a lot more than we are relative to disability, and in some cases, don't even have the same legislation and support. So with that, I know that was like a fast and furious people with disabilities. I hope that you enjoyed the session. I believe that at the swag table in the front, there's a bag. If you want to place your card in it, we've been asked to give away a copy or two of the book, Dive In, which is a book I wrote. We interviewed about 20 very senior executives and asked them for their best practices in all of these areas. We have many tech companies included in that. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the conference.